Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Our very special guest today that I've been wanting on the show for the last 2 years is CarePatrol brand president, Becky, pronounce it, Bongiovanni?
Bongiovanni.
Bongiovanni. Tracy was right. She told me that earlier. I'm like, I don't know if I get this.
That's quite all right. I get it all the time.
So Care Patrol started as a result of seeing the problems that occur with families that are ill-equipped or sometimes just don't have the time to find the safest senior living options on their own. Care Patrol believes that helping families is a way of giving back to the community and is the gift of new life for seniors. Care Patrol's vision is to be the most trusted source in senior care solutions. I can't wait to learn more about you personally, Becky. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The gift of new life that really touched my heart. I'd love to hear about your journey from corporate employee to being a franchiser.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to share. In the early 1990s, I was working in ophthalmology, and I was an ophthalmic assistant. So I was helping with, routine eye care, but also medical surgeries around eyes. So I worked a lot with the geriatric population. I've always loved older people. I've sort of been an old soul, and I feel like there's a lot we can learn, right, from our elders. So I really enjoyed that. During that time, I met my soon-to-be husband, didn't know it then, Chuck, who is a master's degree social worker and had a history of working in home care and in hospitals, and basically had his own business doing what Care Patrol does. He actually came to me, approached me. I met him at church, and he said, I'm looking for some people to work in my company, and I think you would be great. And so I said, well, tell me a little bit more about it. And I was really intrigued by it because, like I say, I love older folks, and I think I saw the struggle my mom went through, trying to take care of my grandparents and really not having guidance or resources. And as I learned more about what Chuck's company did, I was really impressed. So I said, yes, I'll come and work for you. And, the business really gets in your bones because you're doing something really good for people. And you're seeing humanity at its best and sometimes at its worst. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to know that you're helping people make decisions that they probably wouldn't have been able to make on their own, and even helping people get out of really bad situations and into a better situation. So over the years, Chuck was really interested in franchising, and so we were exploring that. And in 2009 we started franchising, and the very first thing we did was hire Bob Gappa, who is a very world-renowned franchise business or franchise consultant to franchisors. And he really helped us kind of cut our teeth in franchising. And I really think about a lot of times all of the things he taught us, and I'm so grateful for that foundation because it really set us up for success. So that's really how we got started in franchising.
I love this story, and I had a fork in the road right now because I want to ask about, okay, when did you fall in love and how did that all happen? I want to hear that part of the story. And then, of course, I want to hear everything about Bob Gappa in those days, and what your perception was of him and the sage wisdom and advice that he gave you. So I think I'm going to choose, when did you fall in love? How did this go from working for Chuck to falling in love? I want that whole story.
So he had his sights on me. I had no idea. You know, I wasn't even interested or looking at him. And I kind of thought he was a big goofball, really. Um, you know, he wasn't like what I would consider my type of guy. Sorry, Chuck. He knows this. I tell him he knows this. So um apparently in his office, him and his friend had a bet that he was going to kiss me by a certain date. And on the calendar, there was this thing that said BK on one of the days. And I said, "What is that?" He's like, "Oh, it's just nothing. It's personal between me and Ed, you know." And but he had set a goal for the first time he was going to kiss me. But I did get a little suspicious. That was what BK stood for, Becky Kiss. So because he was you know, he was training me in the beginning, and there was a lot of whining and dining involved in that training. Like we were going out to lunch every day. I was like, is this normal? Like, you don't have to take me out to lunch. But what I really liked about Chuck is he's he's quite a character. He's very funny, but he's also got a very teddy bear soft side to him. And I think I had come out of a really rocky marriage. I was a single mom with 3 kids, and he was a single dad. He was raising his son on his own, and I think we connected around that. And I saw a really good, gentle person in Chuck, and honestly, someone who's always promoted me. And you know, I probably stretched me to do more than I ever would have on my own. Right? He saw potential in me that maybe I didn't see. So I have to give credit to Chuck. He's the first. He's a great example of female empowerment. You know, which I appreciate that.
That is a great love story. It's beautiful. You know, I think there was a movie similar, except the guy was supposed to get the girl to fall in love. And by that time, that certain date, the girl was supposed to have broken up with the guy. So they're kind of a different kind of story. That was really interesting. I love it when I see like these powerful partnerships, especially where the skill sets, right? You see the potential in the other person, and the skill sets complement each other so that they can build this empire. What do you think were some of your strengths as opposed to some of Chuck's strengths that were able to get you to where you are today?
Oh, I love this topic because it's so true. Chuck and I are in many ways polar opposites. And sometimes people don't even know we're married if they don't know us, because we are so opposite, which is funny. And I actually read the book Traction a couple of years ago, and I was like, wow, this is marriage therapy. This is amazing. Because you know, if you've read that book, Chuck is the visionary and I am the integrator. And so in a marriage relationship, it can be tough, right? Because the integrator's never going to be the bobblehead. You know, they're not going to go, "You're so wonderful, you're just amazing," you know. And that can be hard on a visionary. That hurts their ego if you're always jabbing at them. And I don't mean to jab, but you know, we've got to drive business forward. And you know, one of Chuck's friends used to say, "Oh, Chuck's got a flavor of the day idea." He's very creative. You know, he's almost like that mad scientist where he'll have 1,000 great ideas, but maybe one is executable. You know, so there is a balance. And I think what made it work between Chuck and I is I allowed him that creative freedom where I think most people probably would have said no at a certain point. I just let him go for it, right? Just go at it. And my strengths for him were having the detail, the organization, the follow through, you know, and but it did. I think both of us are happy we're not working with each other anymore, which is interesting. And it's funny because I think some of our early franchisees really did feel like they were with mom and dad, right? Because they got to see the whole family dynamics in the works.
It's an interesting analogy, really, that mom and dad, and then you guys are our children kind of thing. And it does set up a dynamic that sometimes works and sometimes can cause squabbles, right? Go to mom, go to dad. And now that you are running 2 separate companies, Chuck has moved on to Majestic Residences and building that brand now. And Becky, you're continuing to build CarePatrol. And this balance of your gifts, Tracy, I'm so glad you asked that question, because this makes for some of the best marriages, and it makes for some of the best business partners. So the one thing that I want to dig a little bit deeper in is, what do you think he saw in you? I mean, he saw something at church and he goes, I'm not just attracted to this woman and I'd love to make her my wife someday, but he saw talent in you and nurtured it and developed it, and now you are the president, you are the brand ambassador, you are the company. So what did he see?
Well, I think I have to think about what he would say to me. He would always say, why do you don't look at yourself in the right light? You know, he's like, he's like, you're amazing. You are incredibly intelligent. You can run circles around all these people. And I don't know why you think you can't, right? So he was always pushing me. You know, he always wanted to give me fancy titles. And I was like, no, I don't need that. And he's like, what are you talking about? You know more than half the people in this room. So, you know, he was just always encouraging me. And I do think I suffer, to be quite transparent, I probably suffer a little from imposter syndrome, right? I mean, it's not uncommon. I think it's part of maybe being an integrator too, right? I'm okay with being in the background. I don't need the attention. I don't need to be up front. And you know, it's just who I am. But I will say, yeah, I think those are the things he said about me. I'm not sure. I guess we'd have to ask him what he saw. I never asked him that. I should ask him.
Yeah.
We should set them both on.
Yes, we'll get Chuck and Becky on. That'd be
We
fun.
have to do that. That would be fun.
Yeah. I gotta say, Becky, and I mentioned this to you earlier, but I want our audience to hear it too. I can tell you what I saw. I can tell you what I saw, not through the eyes of a man that thinks you're adorable, but through the eyes of a scientist. Um, when I met you face to face and in person, it was at one of your conferences. Um, and Chuck was still on board at that time. And what I noticed was that you had this presence where I felt safe and I felt heard and I felt seen. Here you're having to run a massive conference, and yet you were fully present with whomever you were in front of. So the only way I could describe it was like what you would feel when someone cared and loved you when I was in front of you. And it wasn't just me, I was watching you with others doing the exact same thing. And underneath it was this humbleness and gentleness. And I'm like, this is the head honcho. What is going on here? And you were just so relatable to me. And I'm thinking your franchisees have that same experience of you. Can you see that in yourself, and can you see that others might see you that way?
Well, yeah, I can actually. I'm very much a servant by heart. Like I love serving people and I love helping people. And I do think, you know, my parents really instilled some really great values in me. I grew up in the country, you know, in the middle of nowhere. And so where we lived, you know, you look out for each other, you take care of each other, right? I was raised to take care of my siblings and, you know, look out and always, you know, be honest and be true. And so I think I think that's my favorite part of franchising is I love meeting people. And I feel very close to franchisees because, you know, I did exactly what they're doing today. I mean, I walked that same path. So I have a lot of compassion for what they go through. And I also feel like I can offer a lot of encouragement to them. Because, you know, there's up days and there's down days in the business, but you've got to have that long-term vision to see it through. So I like encouraging and inspiring people. And I do believe that, you can have the kind of life you want to if you really apply yourself. And I think that's what's so wonderful about franchising in general is that, you don't have to be super talented. You just need to, find something that you like, that a system that's proven, and they've got it all mapped out for you, right? Just work the system because the system works. And
Mhm.
it's a great equalizer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I really don't want to gloss over this concept that Rebecca was just mentioning about how you create this safe space. Like psychological safety is a real thing, especially in corporate America, right?
Yes. Yeah.
People are afraid to speak up. And I think it's such a beautiful, wonderful gift when you can give your franchisees and your employees that safe space to be seen, to be heard. And I think that is such a wonderful point that you made, Rebecca, and a beautiful gift that you offer to your teams, Becky.
Well, I love that. I really believe in that concept, and probably maybe more so as being a woman. And I want people to feel good about the relationship that we have. And, Bob, one of the things Bob Gappa taught me
Mm,
was to not hold grudges. And I
Yeah.
think people need that when they're coming into a franchise system. There's probably a lot of fear about what the people right at the franchise on the franchisor office are going to think about you. People come in and they're excited and they want to be your best franchisee, and there's hills and valleys along the way. And so it's important that we help people understand, like we tell them in training, you're going to make mistakes and it's okay.
mm,
Right? Um, and we only ask that you don't make the same mistakes over and over again. But no one's going to hold anything against you, right? We're here to help you. We're part of your team. We're here to support you. And so I'm really proud that we have that culture at CarePatrol. And I think that's one of the things our franchisees, we use the franchise business review for our surveys every year. And we do hear a lot from our franchisees that they do love the culture at CarePatrol. It's very collaborative. And what I'm really proud of is our franchisees adopt that same mindset. And I've had new franchisees come up to me and say, with tears in their eyes, saying, I can't believe how helpful all these people are in this system that really care about me and want me to succeed. So I do think it's contagious. Um,
Yeah.
and it's a good thing. We should all be rooting for each other and helping each other.
Yeah. We get it from the head down, though. You and Chuck laid that foundation. You continue to foster that kind of culture. Is we have each other's back, just like we did in the country, right? We have
Yeah.
each other's back. We care about the success of others. We're not competitors. We are part of a bigger team with a massive mission and a purpose that we live by. And so to mentor others, and encourage one another, share best practices with one another, helps the whole system. I really, Becky, love this undercurrent of it's all about relationship. And franchising really is all about relationship, right?
It really is.
It's crazy. And I wish more got that you're not an entrepreneur, you're not out there doing your own thing. You are part of something bigger. We're in relationship, we are partners, we're doing this together. It's a wonderful feel.
And as we grow, I feel like it is just, to me, I mean, our theme this year was better together. And I feel like it's a constant theme that we have to keep reminding ourselves, because as we grow, it can be more challenging to stay in communication. Everyone's busy, everyone's doing different things. And, I feel like we have a set of values at CarePatrol, and I want to thank Dina Dwyer for inspiring us on that as well. Bob Gap actually was the original one, but I recently, a few years ago, we had Dina Dwyer at our conference, and she took like the values to the next step for me. But we live by a set of values, and I think it's so important to remind our franchisees that, trust is the most important things in relationship. Trust is earned. It's not just given. And trust has to be built into every transaction. And it's not just business, but it's also franchisee to franchisee and franchisee to franchisor. But, this year I'm seeing it in a different way. It's not about me building trust, but it's also about we extend trust to each other, because, it's sort of like the world we live in right now, in this big communication gap where it's just hard because we're all remote and we're not talking as much as we used to. I feel like extending trust is a really important message, because it's something I do all the time. And I'm not sure people are aware how important it is that we do it both sides, because right, I think it's important we communicate every day. We get up and we work hard to make the business profitable for our franchisees, and we need them to extend some trust to us, right, that we're working on their behalf. So it goes both ways.
So I have a question. I feel like being really amongst one of the newer people to franchise, that sometimes I speak on behalf of all those who are new to franchise. So I have not had the privilege of knowing too much about Bob Gappa or interacting too much with him. Can you tell us who he is and just a little background information? Because I understand, as you were mentioning, that he was an incredible mentor to you and Chuck.
Yeah, so I think he's been in franchising since franchising started. And so with all of his years of experience, I think he had put together his own consulting company. At the time when I met him, it was called Management 2000. And so he had classes that he would put on, and you'd get a big manual, it's like this thick, with all the chapters in it. And it was sort of like franchising 101. So it starts with really everything that the IFA teaches you, but it goes in deeper, right? So it just digs in deeper. So explaining how you should set up a franchise development, explaining the role of the franchise business coach, explaining the relationship of the franchisee and the franchisor. And I at the time, like when we had met Bob Gappa, he was also helping people who in their franchise systems, maybe they were having challenges and problems, and he was sort of acting as like an intermediary and helping resolve problems and challenges. And I think that's really great, because he probably could do that as the outside person. And he's got this really calm demeanor, very almost like a Methodist minister. I think that's his background anyway. That's what it reminds me of. But he could just say things in a very, very like fatherly like way, and get you to think about it without making you feel too bad. So really just everything you need to know about franchising in your first year. And it was really, it was great to have that with the IFA's FranGuard class.
So we need to do a whole show just on how much impact Bob Gappa has had. We had Barbara Moran on the show, Becky, who I'm sure you know well, of Moran Family of Brands, and she talked about Bob Gappa's advice to her father of who should take over the Moran brand family of brands. It was Bob Gappa that said,
wow,
it needs to be Barbara. And so he's had a huge impact.
Wow.
And what's amazing to me is these that he has taught, like yourself, like Chuck, there's a ripple effect, right? There's a ripple effect because you've taken this mentoring and you're applying it to the relationships that you have with your franchisees, and they in turn with the families and the seniors, etc. And as I continue to rapidly move towards more of that senior need help place, I'm in awe of your business. I'm going to change gears though, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Talk to me about an aha moment, a boo-boo, a pivotal point, a situation in your life that dramatically impacted you? Maybe it was a mistake, maybe it was a book, maybe it was a conversation, but something that woke you up and made you who you are today.
Oh my gosh. There's probably hundreds of those along the way. And um, I'll tell you, I think my most recent, and I hate to say it because I feel like everybody has talked about it way, way too much, but I think it's sort of the, pandemic, right? But also there was a couple of things happening. We had just been acquired a couple years earlier. And so that always creates upset in your system, right? Because they just don't know what to expect. So we went from that to Chuck leaving the company and starting a new one, which was a huge and then in the midst of COVID. And then even though we did very well during COVID, it was still a very scary, unsettling time, right, for our franchisees. So I feel like in business, that was probably one of the toughest things I had to go through. And I did sort of go through this, you know, becoming a little bit of a different person out of necessity for the people who need me to be that other person. Because remember, I said Chuck is the visionary and I'm the integrator. And I think during that time, I have now like kind of morphed into Chuck. Right? Because I have to, because I'm the head of the company. And it's interesting. So my VP of Ops is sort of the integrator now, right? And those roles have reversed. And it's funny because I will catch myself saying, oh my, I'm saying things that Chuck would have said, or I'm behaving as Chuck did, that things maybe that used to drive me nuts. And now I see the wisdom in what he was trying to accomplish. But more than that, even it's interesting when you become the top of the company, how people really get in your heart and in your soul, and you dream about them. You're up at night thinking about them. And I did before, and it's hard to imagine that it's even more so now. And it's simply because of just I changed from one position to another. So I really try to be the best I can for the people in this company. And who knows where my future is, but I'll be here as long as I can make a difference.
Beautiful. And I actually had noticed, because when Rebecca was mentioning that you're now brand ambassador for the company, I'm like, oh, that sounds like he was more of the promoter. And now you're more of the promoter. And of course, I'm seeing like both of your spot on profiles in front of my face, like trying to figure out. But meanwhile, I'm wondering, what was your biggest takeaway, like your biggest learning from your business career path?
Well, I think especially in that, I think recently for me, I tend to be very diplomatic and I always want to see everyone's side. And I think what has been a big learning for me is that if you're going to be the leader, you have to be okay with making decisions and that other people are angry at you about, because you have to be able to see the long term and down the road. And I think during that transition, I struggled a lot with that. Now I think I do a lot better, but that was a huge aha for me. You have to have courage, and part of being that leader is you have to see 10 feet down the road, and you have to be okay with people being upset with you in the process, because they'll see the wisdom later.
Wow. I read a book years ago. I think it's called The 5 Biggest Mistakes a CEO Makes. And number one was just what you said.
Wow.
Just what you said. It's trying to make everybody happy. It's hard to make those difficult decisions, is wanting others to really like you. And sometimes they're not going to like the decision you make, which sometimes could show up or be perceived as they don't like me. And that seems to be one of the biggest mistakes CEOs do make, is wanting everyone to like them and to please everyone. And sometimes you just can't do it. The other thing that popped up in my head, Tracy, as you were talking, was we evolve, we change, right? Becky, you changed
Yeah.
from your mentors and your wonderful husband and going
Yeah.
through a growing pains of CarePatrol to now being a brand president. Um, we do change. You know, God is not through with us. We are always going to be learning and evolving, and you stepped up to it. I think one of the attributes that's hard for integrators is having to be adaptable, right? And when things are thrown at us or whatever, and it appears you've done it beautifully. Would you consider yourself adaptable, flexible, or is this something you've had to learn as you go?
So that maybe that's where I'm not so much of an integrator, because I tend to be very adaptable. In fact, I've called myself a chameleon many times. And I don't think I think it's very just intuitive within me. And it's sort of like when I was 40 years old, that's when I had an aha moment that I was a chameleon. And part of it was bad because I was being what everybody else needed me to be, but I wasn't being true to myself, right? So there is that side of me, but I do think in a good way, I am very open to new ideas and to thinking differently. I don't shut those things down. And I do think Chuck kind of helped me along. Maybe if I hadn't been around him so much, maybe I wouldn't have been as open. But I am an open person in general. And I do believe in looking at things in new ways. So that probably has helped me a little bit.
All right, we're giving an official shout out to Chuck. Here's
Yeah.
to
We love
say
Chuck.
hi. You are awesome. Just okay. You know what else it reminds me of? I think it's Don Miguel Ruiz, the 5 agreements or the four agreements. And one of them is don't take anything personally. And I think that's part of what you're talking about also, Becky. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. You can't take things personally.
Yeah.
It's a business, right?
Yeah.
We can't always have kumbaya, even if we try.
No. And I think especially when we first started in franchising, that was very hard for me. Very, very hard for me. So it's funny now looking back, how much I really have changed.
What was the hardest for you? What was hard about those initial stages? And what would you tell somebody who was getting into franchising now?
Okay, so I think the hardest thing is when you have someone who is failing at your system, because you know they could be doing well, and it's confusing why maybe they don't. This is something I've never understood, but I don't even. I think it's just life and where people are at maybe at the time, but why sometimes people can join part of a franchise system, but then they just don't apply themselves. I mean, there's a lot of money invested, right, to do those things. So I think early on that was tragic for me, just tragic. And actually we, Chuck and I will go drive out and try to save you and do everything we can. And, as you grow, you just can't do that stuff with everybody. So allowing people to have the personal responsibility, which is something Bob Gappa teaches you, right? This is what your responsibility is. This is what my responsibility is. And having those boundaries in business, because you will drive yourself, mad if you don't kind of set those clear boundaries and hold people to expectations. We need to hold ourselves accountable just as much as we hold other people accountable. So it's not a one-way street. But that's big. And then I would say, as you're growing in your franchise, in the beginning, you don't take for granted all the time that you have, because you always feel like you have no time. But if you're just starting out and you've got, 5 franchisees or 10, trust me, you have all the time in the world. And this is the time now to put in systems and processes. Don't think we'll do that later, because you're going to be moving so fast later. And then what you can do is you can really get yourself in a bad situation because you're operationally crippled because you didn't set those things up from the start. So make sure you have, well-written processes, policies, procedures for everything, and think big from the beginning. I remember one of our very first franchisees, we got our first office, and I thought, oh my gosh, this place is so huge. And she had a bit bigger vision than me. She said, really, you think it's huge? I think it's small. We're going to fill this up in no time. And I think that was probably my Achilles heel for many years, is kind of like, we're not going to grow that big. Come on, guys, be prepared and expect more. What was the last thing I was going to say? As it related to in relation to thinking on a big scale, I think for franchisors, I've shared this before at like emerging franchisor conferences. When Chuck and I started the franchise, we wanted to be so fair to our franchisees, which I'm still proud of. I don't regret it 1 second. But we didn't think about what that would do to the company long term. So we had flat fee royalties for many years. And a couple of things happened in that. When you're on a flat fee, it's hard to scale your business. And so what do you have to do to scale? You have to raise those fees. And when you do that, that leaves the franchisees feeling very alienated because there's always a moving target. And so, as it relates to scaling, our franchisees actually reached out to us and said, this is really tough on us and you need to fix it. And we went to finance, and we're working all kinds of ways that we could figure out that would be equitable for the system. And I'm really proud of our franchisees. We went to them with our plan, and 90% of them said, yes, we want to do this. And we did something that's probably really difficult to do in midstream. And I do think it's because of relationships, and listening and building credibility and trust. So I think even if you do have those boo-boos along the way, like we were talking about earlier, you've got to really have strong relationships with people so they understand and know you are looking out for their best interest.
I think we have a theme here, ladies. The theme is build a firm foundation on relationships, because even when you make boo-boos, they understand, they're forgiving, they'll come together. There's a bigger mission here, and we can keep moving forward. And you've done a beautiful job of just that. A lot of us can learn from you, Becky. So we need to wrap this up. Shout out to Chuck. We love you. Shout out to Bob Gappa. Thank you for changing the landscape of franchising. Shout out to Dina Dwyer and her message about building businesses on a set of values. And shout out to Barbara Moran for also having a shout out to Bob Gappa. And most importantly, Becky, thank you. Thank you for sharing your heart and the way your mind thinks. From my perspective, I could see exactly what Chuck saw in you. Called imposter syndrome on your end. He saw the real you. And we are now seeing the real you where you need to be as a leader. So thank you for joining us today. Tracy, what are your final thoughts, hon?
Well, so first, can we get Becky to let us know if anybody wants to get in touch with her?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Sure. Wow. So if you want to get in touch with me, you could email me at bbongiovanni@carepatrol.com. You could reach out to me on LinkedIn. Further than that, I think that's probably good enough, right? Those are two great ways for people to reach out to me.
Perfect. So thanks, Rebecca. I halfway through the interview, I started imagining this big I don't know how to pronounce it. Sieve, S-I-E-V-E. I could spell it. I don't know how to pronounce it, right? It's one of those difficult words. But
Yeah.
I started envisioning that. And Becky, you really remind me of someone who is like this big sieve, where you're everything that you're learning, like the things that aren't important, that just don't matter, that aren't real, just fall out the bottom. And everything that's important, the people, the learnings, the mentorship, the reapplying of things that you've learned and how you've grown and what you know, like that all gets caught inside and combined with your heart. That's where you share it all from. This great big heart, this great big beautiful brain, and all of this learning that you're so willing and open to build these relationships, this trust, and to even rethink your own policies where and when you have needed to along the way. Like, I have to tell you, I applaud you for that. And that was the vision that I kept seeing over and over again. So thank you for that, and for being such a fascinating role model to people in franchise and to, women and business people.
Oh my goodness. Well, well, thank you, ladies, for having me on the show. I mean, I think we all iron sharpens iron, and I've learned from a lot of great people, and I'm still learning as I go, which is great. I'm a work in progress as well. And I do want to, there's one other person I just want to mention quickly, who's really helped me a lot, and that's my current CEO, Jay Sorrenti. I don't know if you are familiar with him or not. He joined Best Life Brands in 2020 during the crisis, and I have to say, he is a very empathetic, emotionally intelligent leader, and has also been really pivotal in my life of helping me become the leader that I need to be. So I think what I think is really amazing is this is a show about women empowerment, but isn't it nice to know that there's men out there that are also wanting to empower women? Thank you, guys.
Yeah, just like Chuck and just like your CEO that are behind the women and see their potential and will do what's necessary to bring it forward.
Yeah, because it's not about men or women, it's about people, but it's just refreshing when you don't have to have the silly games that go on.
I agree. So thank you again, Becky. And thank you to those that are listening in today. Make sure to share this interview with your friends and others in the world of franchising. Subscribe, of course, to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. We'll see you next week on another episode.